The 6 to 7 Figure Show, Episode 3. Ready? Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona, this is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
Welcome to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria. Today, we're going to be talking about lead magnets. Now, I want to dig in deep on lead magnets because a lot of people know the concept of how you put a lead magnet together, but I want to give you some advanced tips that are going to really help you drive conversions and engagement with your prospects. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So today you're going to learn about lead magnets in today's episode, but if you want to ask questions and engage with us, the place you need to be is 7 Figures Plus. That is online as a free Facebook community. So just go to frankbria.com. Right there in the middle of the page, you can get your invitation to the free Facebook community 7 Figures Plus, or go on to Facebook and search for 7 Figures Plus and join us there for free, because that's where the discussion is going to pick up. It's going to happen there. All the questions, all the back and forth ideas from other people, exchanging concepts on how people are doing lead magnets, that's all happening there. So if you want to get in on the discussion, that's where it's going to be. All right, what goes into putting a good lead magnet together? Okay, I think you guys probably know this already, but let's go over the basics. 3 big things I want to talk about. Okay, first of all, there's got to be some kind of a freebie. Okay, some people call it an ethical bribe. Some people call it a lot of different things. It's a freebie. I don't care what you call it. It's something you're giving away. You need also a landing page that people are going to get that freebie, or you need some opt-in process. Okay, maybe it's not even a landing page, but it's a call to action or an opt-in box. We're going to talk about that today too. And then finally, and I think people forget this when they talk about lead magnets, you need some kind of follow-up. All right, and we're going to talk about the right ways to follow up and a couple of different ways to structure that can be really useful. But without those 3 things together, you're going to be stuck, because that freebie needs to be something that is going to be relevant to your audience when you finally go to convert. This is something I think people forget. People think about their lead magnet and they're like, well, let's just come up with something that people might be interested in and I'll give them away for free. That's great. Except what you've done is you've essentially started the conversation with your audience, and if you try to change the subject in the middle, you're going to get it wrong. And I'll tell you this from personal experience because I've screwed this up myself. I one time had a lead magnet. It did really, really well. It was 20 steps to writing your own book, because I thought, hey, my audience that wants to become an authority and grow their platform, they want to write a book, right? Great. So I put this lead magnet out there, 20 steps to writing your own book. And it was downloaded like crazy. Like, people loved it, okay? The problem is that the audience and my email list that was built from that particular lead magnet was interested in writing their own book. And so when I started to talk to them about creating authority and building a business and breaking through your revenue barrier, these things just didn't resonate with them. And then when I tried to sell them something, they really didn't like it. And I'll tell you, to this day, almost all, I'm trying to think if it's actually all, I think it's almost all, if not all, of my opt-outs that I have from my list have come from that group. Okay, because they got a message that was very different from the one I really wanted to tell. So it's important that when you think about whatever it is you're going to give away, you just don't focus on what people might want, but you have to think through the rest of the messages. There needs to be continuity in what you do. Now, landing page or opt-in process. There's a number of different ways to do this, okay? First of all, having a landing page is one way, and there's a lot of great resources to do that. But you might just have an opt-in box, or you might have a pop-up on your website, and there's a number of different technologies you can use depending on the website technology, the web platform that you're on. But there needs to be some opt-in process, okay? That opt-in process needs to be as frictionless as possible. So don't make it difficult for people to give you the information that you need. And then finally, the follow-through, right? How are you going to deliver your freebie, and what are you going to do next? And I think a lot of people don't think about this because they're like, great, I got an email address, woohoo, we're in business. Well, now what? And you got to have it quickly. I made the mistake early on of thinking, well, I'll just set up a lead magnet, I'll just start collecting email addresses. But because I didn't do anything with them, except for say, thanks and here's your thing, I was sort of like, well, I don't know what my strategy is for communicating with them yet. Too much time passed, and a lot of those folks just, stopped being engaged. And I remember having to flush an entire list purely because I didn't act quickly enough and it just got stale. I didn't engage. So you need to have some kind of an engagement model. And all three of these are really important components to doing it right. So we're going to actually hit each one in depth, go into some really advanced stuff on how to get this right so that you can have a lead magnet that's great for your community. All right, what makes a good freebie? It used to be that great freebies were things like, free reports or video training or, drip email courses or things like that. And sometimes that can still work depending on audiences, but, people are a lot more sophisticated on the internet now about what they're getting. And frankly, there's a lot more instant gratification need. So you need to come up with a freebie that's going to be easily consumed and quickly consumed. So if your lead magnet is anything bigger than one page, then you're probably overdoing it. Not from the sense of oversharing or over giving away your content, but overdoing it in the sense that I don't really know what to do with this. Okay. Now, it used to be people would say, well, it really doesn't matter because I've already got your email address, right? So even if you sat on it and never used it, then, big deal. But the fact is that people really want to establish a relationship with someone who's going to add value to their business and their life. And if you can't do that on this very first super easy freebie, then it's done. It's finished. Consumers and business owners, when they get that freebie from you, especially when you make big promises in the headline and can't deliver on it, you've immediately lost the trust. I have personally opted out on the very first email of sequences where I thought the lead magnet that I downloaded didn't at all conform to my expectations. Okay, so it's very important as you title your lead magnet and you deliver it that you do it with the appropriate amount of value. Don't chintz on it. Don't make it super simple or easy or obvious. Okay, so that means don't waste your users' time giving them something they can just Google and find. Okay, for example, if you're going to give someone a list of, let's say you're helping people find speaking opportunities, right? If you gave them a list of like 50 speaking places where they can go find speaking opportunities, that's great, right? Because in order for me to find that, I would have to go out on Google and Google 50 times. But if you're just going to say, here are the 5 things you need to do for your speaking engagement, don't just list the obvious, right? Find the person, reach out to them, make an offer, let them know your price. Like, come on, give them something of serious value. Like, give them a swipe file. Give them something they can use immediately, okay? The best lead magnets out there are things that I can copy and paste into my business. Okay, so think about that as you're putting your freebie together. It's got to be easily consumable. Quickly, I assess the value proposition, and if I can put it into action today, even better. So think long and hard about something like that. Can I do it? Is it a step-by-step tutorial? Is it a something I can use today? Can I copy and paste it? These are good questions you should be asking yourself about a freebie. Now, if you're thinking about or struggling with the topic or the thing that you should create the freebie around, I like to ask the people, my clients and other people I talk to about this, the following question. What is the number one thing that you could teach your audience that'll give them the biggest value right now? So if someone came up to you, at a cocktail party or at a networking event or something like that and said, "Hey, Frank, man, I'm struggling with the exact problem you're trying to solve. What's the one big secret that I can go home and do right now?" Think about that. What one thing would you tell them to do? Now, make that easily consumable and swipeable. And if so, you've got yourself an awesome lead magnet. So think very carefully about the usability of what you're creating. It's got to be the biggest lever, the biggest value. So many people do the exact opposite. They think, well, I'll save my really good stuff for the stuff I sell. And people can smell that a mile away, okay? It's really obvious that you're not delivering on that promise. I just recently was reading something. This was actually a book, not even a lead magnet, so it's even worse than that because I actually paid money for it. A book that said how to do this. And the book was all about why you should do it and examples of it, but don't really tell you how. If you say how to do this, you have to answer the question, how do I do that? Don't leave people hanging. Don't leave people thinking, oh, wow, they set my need up so well, I better go buy their stuff. No, you've totally ruined trust with your audience when you do that. So do not set up a headline you cannot fulfill on. Okay? Be very careful because people use the how-to very, very often because it's a powerful title. It's a powerful headline. But if you're going to say how-to, you better deliver how-to. So, in your freebie, think about that. Think about something that's easily consumable, swipeable, put into action today. And think about one big thing that you could do, which would be incredibly leverage success for your client immediately. That's what you should be putting in your freebie. Later on this week, you're going to hear an actual coaching conversation, a hot seat conversation with a business owner trying to develop a lead magnet. And I walk through these very steps so you can actually hear exactly how that process is going to go. So watch out for that later this week. It'll be a great episode. I think you'll learn a ton from listening to the thought process of creating a killer lead magnet. Once you've got your freebie in place, you have to have somewhere for an opt-in process. And a lot of people choose a landing page as the way to go. You should have your lead magnet positioned in a number of different places. And by the way, I'm a big fan of having a single lead magnet for the vast majority of business owners. There are certain cases where you could have multiple kinds of lead magnets, but frankly, it's confusing to your audience. And especially if you're trying to grab engagement from another channel, having consistency in a lead magnet is really, really important. So it's not like you need to create 10,000 landing pages. Now, I know there are people who do long tail strategies and get a lot of business that way. That's fine. But if you're a business owner trying to create credibility and authority in a 7-figure business, you're not doing that. Okay, you can't really create credibility and authority on a long tail strategy and have 100 different landing pages because what are you credibly an authority on if you have 100 different landing pages? You can't be an authority on all of them, right? So specifically for folks who are creating credibility and authority to generate 7-figure businesses, you really need to have one lead magnet. This is especially the case if you're leveraging a platform like a book or a YouTube video or a podcast or something else that's getting people to come to your website. You want that to be continuous and constant and in their head, top of mind all the time. Think about it. If you had a book and people are reading a book and you basically offer like 7 different freebies all the way through the book, there's no way anyone's going to keep track of that. Yeah, it's possible that someone puts the book down and then goes to their computer and types in the URL from your book, or maybe they're reading an ebook and they press the button and they go immediately to your page. But But to interrupt the flow, it's really got to be something that sticks in their head. Okay, so you want to be consistent. So if people see you on different channels, they're seeing the exact same message from you. So think very carefully about that. You want to have one really good lead magnet. It has to be a killer. So again, having that one thing show up on a landing page or a lead box or your homepage, there's going to be a number of different places. First of all, the homepage of your website should have an opt-in box for your lead magnet at the very top above the fold, period. End of story. There needs to be some way for people to connect and give you their information immediately. Second of all, you should have a very specific landing page with keywords that are specific to what it is that you're giving away. Yes, you should be doing SEO with that, but you should not leave traffic. You should not hand traffic over to Google. All right? You don't want to be just basically handing your traffic over or your business over to Google to run. If Google decides to send traffic your way, great. If not, well, then, too bad for you. You don't want that. You're gonna want to control that. So sure, do the keyword research, get it SEO optimized, make sure you've got links and all that kind of stuff. Do that work. But seriously, the biggest thing you can do is drive your own traffic, and there's a lot of ways to do that, which we'll actually talk about in a couple of weeks. But also have pop-up boxes tastefully done on your website, as well as things that are just lead boxes. Like Lead Pages has this thing called lead boxes, which I love, where you basically click on a link, you think it's a link, and you just have a little pop-up, okay? Interactive pop-up, give your information, you're almost done, get your stuff. Now, I think people have seen it enough that it's not gimmicky anymore. People sort of expect it. One word on pop-ups, okay? There's a lot of things that people argue about, a lot of issues that people aren't in agreement on about the uses of pop-ups on your website. I think pop-ups convert, period. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a convert to this world, okay? I used to be a guy who thought that pop-ups were not a good idea, that they were bad, they didn't work very well. Then I tested it on my website, and I found out that a tasteful pop-up converts, period. End of story. I saw the conversion and I gave up the dogma. Okay, I used to think, pop-ups are cheap and they make you look like you're spammy marketer. I mean, you certainly can do it that way, but done tastefully well and appropriately handled, they convert. End of story. I mean, I've seen it in my own business. I know it's true. So make sure that you think about that as you put your own website together. Now, here's a couple of thoughts, though. Number one, people definitely use the exit behavior pop-ups. Okay, so if it looks like I'm going to open a new tab or it looks like I'm going to close the browser, a pop-up shows up at exit. That's kind of like your last-ditch effort, right? Hey, before you go, one last thing. That's not a bad thing to do, but honestly, think about where you are in the mindset of your customer, okay? They have just made the decision that they are done with your site, and you interrupt them and say, hey, before you go, one last thing. Now, that may be effective, and actually, you may have nothing to lose doing that because they're going to leave anyway, right? So chances are, if they haven't opted in by now, they may not be coming back. So giving them one last chance to engage with you is not a bad idea, but it shouldn't be your only idea, because the fact is that interrupting a prospect in the middle of their thought process is very ineffective. I mean, it's a good last-ditch effort. You shouldn't give up on it, but it's ineffective. So make sure you have some effective things you can do. Okay, first of all, splash screens, hello screens, and pop-ups the moment you show up on a site are super annoying to prospects. Why? They just got there. They got there for a reason. They wanted to see something. So give them the thing that they wanted to see. Give them an opportunity to engage with you. Give them an opportunity to build some trust and credibility with you. That's very important. I think people forget that. So make sure there's a delay in the pop-up. Now, there's a couple of very smart things you can do with pop-up delays. For example, on blog posts, you can program them to pop up as someone has read through halfway through your content. Or you can simply insert the opt-in in the middle of the content. Although honestly, pop-ups have better behavior associated with them because they basically interrupt the process of reading, but they do it in a way that basically says, yeah, I got to deal with this. You can skim over an opt-in box that's sitting in the middle of your your blog post. It's kind of like, TV commercials on a DVR. You can just fast forward through it. So pop-ups are timed pop-ups based on the behavior of your prospect are actually really quite helpful. If you don't have a blog post, if it's maybe a landing page or it's just a general pop-up on your site, definitely schedule it to happen after about 15 to 20 to 30 seconds of being on the site. Give people an opportunity to get the thing done or at least start the task before you interrupt them. Now, notice this is a little bit different than the end behavior interruption because I'm not changing your mind about what you're doing. You're here on my site. You still have stuff to do, so you're still going to continue on. But this just gives you an opportunity to build some trust and credibility and say, hey, let's engage. It might even be helpful to use language in the pop-up box that levels with the consumer about what you're doing, okay, the prospect. So, hey, listen, yeah, pardon the interruption, but it would be great for us to be able to connect, and I think this is be a great value. Or, pardon the interruption, I wouldn't interrupt what you're doing if I didn't think this was important. I think this might be of value to you, okay? Use language like that. It helps continue a conversation. It makes it feel like the prospect is talking with you rather than having you talk at them. So acknowledging the interruption, acknowledging the need for them to engage with you in a more deep way is a very sophisticated tactic. Now, on landing pages, one last thing I want to address. A lot of people have this question about should we use text or video in order to get people to opt in. The fact is that there's no good single answer on this, and you just have to test. So on landing pages, you want to make sure you have an infrastructure where you can do some split testing, and that you take your audience's preferences into consideration. For example, if I'm talking to you, my podcast audience, and I send you someplace, I'm going to try to give you audio or video because I already know that's the way you want to communicate, because we're communicating that way now via audio. You're used to hearing my voice, so if you hear my voice again, it kind of connects the dots, right? So that's something you should take into consideration. If you're talking to people who like to read, or if it's a blog post, or you're coming from blog posts, or you think that reading, that people would want to do this at work, then use text because it's easier for them to be able to do that. But frankly, you don't know and you won't know until you test. So make sure you take the opportunity to do that. Test your landing pages, see what works best. Once you get some traffic in there, you can start to tweak some things in the process. So good luck with building your landing page and your lead magnet. There's some great stuff that you can do there that's going to help you drive engagement if you think again about your audience and what it is that they really need from you. That about wraps it up for us today on lead magnets. Hopefully this has been really helpful because this is the beginning of that audience building technique that you have to have. If you are interested in conversing with us about this, asking questions, getting ideas from other people, or even just like posting your lead magnet and getting feedback from other people, join us in 7 Figures Plus. It's a free Facebook group for listeners of this podcast, communities and fans of this podcast. So grab an invite for that. It's totally free. You can get one at frankbria.com, or you can just search for it on Facebook and request to be added, and we will make sure that you're in the group because that's where we're going to be having a dialogue about lead magnets. This whole week, we're going to just be talking about lead magnets. Now, if you want help implementing your lead magnets, or you want coaching or assistance from our group, then the mastermind is the place for you to be. And you can get information on that also at frankbria.com, or just hang out in the Facebook group and start the conversation with us there. Start the dialogue, and we'd be happy to chat. Make sure that you join us over there because that's where the good stuff's gonna go down. I'm so grateful that you spent time with us today. My name is Frank Bria. I've been your host on this episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show, and I look forward to talking with you again soon. Until then, make it happen.